The Houston Cougars have been one of the better Group of 5 programs historically, and they've had a ton of big-name players and coaches. Coaches like Art Briles, Kevin Sumlin, Tom Herman, Major Applewhite, and now more recently Dana Holgorsen have all coached there, and they've had big-time quarterbacks such as Case Keenum, Kevin Kolb, David Klinger, Greg Ward, and most recently De'Aaron King. Houston is always seemingly competitive, and as they head to the Big 12 Conference in a few years, many expect the ceiling of the program to continue to climb. This year was supposed to be special for the Cougars. Many thought they were the best Group of 5 team in college football. They had an experienced quarterback, a good coach, a dynamic pair of receivers, and were even ranked in the top 25 to start the season. Expectations were through the roof for the Cougars, and personally, I was so excited to watch them. Unfortunately, through a month of football, you could argue they have been the most disappointing team in the country. Yeah, there are other teams that look a lot worse, but compared to the expectations, Houston has been extremely disappointing. In today's video, we're going to talk about the Houston program, go through the expectations into this year, how the season has gone, and what I expect to happen for them moving forwards. But before we get into it, be sure to subscribe to the channel as we're on the road to 100K. Leave a like if you want to support what I'm doing here, and turn on notifications so you never miss a college football video. Now let's talk about some Houston football. Going way back in time, Andre Ware was the guy who really put Houston on the map. He had 75 passing touchdowns through only 3 years, and went on to win the Heisman Trophy in 1989. This guy was absolutely insane, but at the time, Houston was still part of the Southwest Conference. In 1996, they would end up joining the Conference USA, and they would go through coaches Kim Helton and Dana Dimel before they would get to the guy who would turn things around, Art Briles. He was a legendary high school coach, and when he arrived at Houston, he'd turn everything around. In 2 out of his first 3 years, the Cougars would make bowl games before they'd have their big break in 2006. Led by their star quarterback Kevin Kolb, the Cougars would win 10 games in 2006, where they'd eventually lose to South Carolina in the Liberty Bowl. While the Cougars never jumped into the top 25, they would continue their success as they'd once again tie for the conference and would go 8-5 in 2007. They'd end up losing in the Texas Bowl to TCU before they'd head into their next era of football in 2008. Kevin Sumlin would take over as the head coach, and he would then bring the Cougars to new heights. By this time, the Cougars had a new quarterback, and his name was Case Keenum. As in his career for Houston, he'd have over 19,000 yards and 155 touchdowns. This is completely absurd when you think about it, and Keenum was a 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, a 2-time Conference MVP, had his jersey retired, was a first-team All-American, a 2-time recipient of the Sammy Baugh Trophy, and at the time broke the record for most career passing touchdowns, most career passing yards, and most career pass completions. It's obvious that Houston was going to have a lot of success with him, as he would lead them to so much success. Twice they finished first in the conference, and even got Houston ranked for the first time in an eternity. Kevin Sumlin did such a great job with him in the Houston program that he left to take the head coaching job at Texas A&M. From there, they'd hire from within and promote Tony Levine to head coach. In his 2 years at Houston, he was just alright. He went 5-7 in 2012, 8-5 in 2013, and 7-5 in 2014. He went 21-17 before he was eventually fired. After that, they hired up-and-coming head coach Tom Herman from Ohio State, and he would find his new star quarterback in Greg Ward Jr. In 4 years with the Cougars, Ward would have 52 passing touchdowns, would finish top 10 in career rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, and would finish 3rd all-time in all-purpose yards for Houston. In 2 years, Herman would see insane success. In 2015, the team went 13-1 with a 7-1 record in the American, and then they would beat Florida State in the Peach Bowl. This led many to believe that Houston was a college football playoff contender in 2016, and that is exactly what would happen. They would upset Oklahoma in Week 1, and they'd also defeat a top 5 Louisville team. Unfortunately, they had some mid-season mess-ups as they ended up going 5-3 and finished with a 9-3 record. Herman went 22-4 in 4 years. Herman went 22-4 and then left to take the Texas job. After Herman came Major Applewhite. He was a well-known Texas quarterback who is now looking to make it big in the coaching world. In 2 years with the Cougars, the team went 15-11 with 2 losses in bowl games. I guess they didn't like how the program had stagnated, so they decided to fire him. At the time, they had found their new star quarterback in De'Aaron King, but Dana Holgorsen would do something weird when he arrived. After a slow start to the season, De'Aaron King would opt out for the remainder of the year, and Houston would end up going 4-8. In 2020, the team went 3-5, and many people were seemingly starting to forget about Houston football and how good they were. That was until last year. Expectations were decently high for the Cougars, as they were picked to finish 4th in the American. They returned an experienced quarterback in Clayton Tune, had a running back by committee approach, and had a couple of young receivers who are ready to step up. Unfortunately, they get off to a rocky start, as in Week 1 against Texas Tech, they would lose 38-21. This Red Raiders team did make a bowl game, but this would shock a lot of people. Luckily for Houston though, they'd put that game in the rearview mirror pretty quickly, as they would go on a roll. They blew out Rice, shut out Grambling State, won a close game over Navy, killed Tulsa, and killed Tulane before an overtime win over East Carolina. The team was now 6-1, but they had still not yet entered the polls. After upsetting number 19 SMU, some thought they would be ranked. It would take wins over South Florida and Temple before they'd finally enter the AP poll at number 24. At the time, the team was now 9-1, and they would beat both Memphis and UConn to finish the regular season with 11 straight wins and obviously an undefeated record. They'd end up going to the American Championship game where they would lose to number 4 Cincinnati. The game was close, but at the end the Bearcats were the better team, and Houston would not be able to spoil that one. Despite having such a terrific season, they kind of got screwed in their bowl game as they were put against Auburn in the Birmingham Bowl. Auburn was a team that only won 6 games and was severely trending down, while Houston had a really good year and was one of the hottest teams in the country. It didn't really matter though, as they'd end up winning 17-13, and this would punctuate a terrific season for them. They'd end up going 12-2 with an 8-0 conference record and would finish the season ranked number 17. The Cougars had a ton of stars. Logan Hall was a second-round pick at defensive end. Marcus Jones was an incredible all-purpose player who went in the 3rd round to the Patriots, and then Demarion Williams was a breakout star at corner. That doesn't even touch on all the other incredible players they had. Clayton Tune ended up throwing for 3,500 yards with 30 touchdowns. Alton McCaskill was insane at running back as he ran for 961 yards and 16 touchdowns. And wide receiver Nathaniel Dell was probably the most underrated player in the country as he finished with 90 catches for 1,329 yards and 12 scores. The even crazier part was they were going to return all 3 of these guys. Were going to return their coach. Cincinnati was looking to rebuild, and they also signed a big-time high school football player who was going to make this team even better. His name was Matthew Golden. He was a 4-star recruit and a nearly top 200 player in the class of 2022, and him and Nathaniel Dell were going to be a 1-2 punch at receiver. The sky looked to be the limit for Houston, and that's why they were picked to win the American and started the year ranked number 24. Unfortunately though, it has not gone according to plan. In week 1, they would travel to UTSA for a trap game. The Roadrunners were one of the best surprises of the 2021 season, but many still expected Houston to go and win this game pretty easily. That is not how it went though. They would end up making a comeback and eventually won in 3 overtimes, 37-35. All that really mattered was that Houston won the game, but things would get a little bit more difficult the following weekend as they'd have to go on the road to Texas Tech. Just like last week, they struggled to put the Red Raiders away and would end up losing in double overtime this time, 30-33. I guess it's incredibly difficult to get lucky 2 weeks in a row, but Texas Tech had a couple of miracle plays, and Houston had multiple opportunities to win that game. Luckily, they get to go back home though and play Kansas. Unfortunately, Houston really folded in this game as Kansas ran all over them, and the game was never really close. KU won 48-30 and now gave the Cougars their 2nd straight loss. This past weekend, they didn't really look that much better though, as they only beat Rice 34-27. And Rice is one of the worst teams in college football. Through 4 games, the Cougars have honestly not looked that impressive. While all 3 of those schools are actually pretty decent, Houston's expectation was to be the best team in the conference and to be the best group of 5 teams, so they have definitely disappointed. Clayton Tune hasn't been bad, but he has not played as well as he did last year. He doesn't even have 1,000 yards through 4 games, and only has 7 touchdowns compared to 3 picks. They are definitely missing their running back Alton McCaskill dearly, as he had a knee injury in the spring and has not been able to play. The Cougars really haven't been able to get that running game going, as neither Tayzon Henry or Brandon Campbell have really started to explode yet. Despite that, both Nathaniel Dell and Matthew Golden were supposed to be insane, and right now only Dell is looking that great. He has 25 catches and 380 yards and 3 scores through 4 matchups, but his ultra-high stock is starting to trend down. The Cougars have had multiple problems this year, but right now discipline has been a huge factor. To be honest, I think penalties are the biggest issue for Houston. Here is how many they've had. They had 11 penalties in week 1. 12 in week 2, 10 in week 3, and 4 in week 4. The team has 43 penalties through 4 games, and they just keep shooting themselves in the foot. I do think Houston is the most talented team in the American, and honestly should be undefeated at this point. The 2 reasons I have come up with why Houston has struggled this year is simple. The first one is obviously those flags, and second, it's Alton McCaskill. McCaskill was nearly a 1,000-yard rusher and had over 20 combined touchdowns throughout the year. He was their most dynamic player at the running back spot. They have just not been able to get that going. I would like to see Clayton Tune play a little bit better, but right now the 2 reasons Houston could be considered the most disappointing team is because of penalties in the ground game. But what the heck do I know? I'm by no means a Houston football expert, so if you're a fan of the Cougars, let me know down below. What has gone wrong for the team? What are your expectations moving forward? And how can they fix this mess? If you're a fan of another school, be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know another program I could take a look at next. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.